Hi, and welcome to Tea Leaves Programming. Today, we're programming like it's 1979, and I wanted to talk some more about programming FPGAs on macOS. They said it couldn't be done. They were very, very wrong. So I posted my last video from last week on programming an FPGA on the Mac on Reddit, and it sparked some really interesting discussion. One person suggested, have you looked at OneWare Studio? And I said, well, no, I haven't. What is OneWare Studio? And it turns out it's another multi-platform FPGA development IDE. So let's take a quick look. I just wanted to spend 5 minutes showing you OneWare. It does seem like a viable alternative to the two also very good workflows I showed you last week. So here we can see OneWare Studio. I'm editing a Verilog file, and I've made the font a little larger than the default so that it's easy to see on YouTube. You can see here we have a very simple demo that's just going to light up the LEDs when the associated switch is pressed. So we can compile this, compile just fine, and we can download it to our board. And as expected, pressing the button lights the lights. Now, one thing you might notice is that the names of the pins here are different than what I was using before. How is that possible? Did I change the constraints file? Well, they have a very interesting UI here called the pin planner. Let's take a look at it. So the pin planner is pretty nifty. So what it seems to do, and I haven't gone into huge detail on this yet, is it's aware of the names that you've given your inputs and outputs in your file. That's these nodes over here. And it's aware of the constraints in your PCF file. And so what you can do is tie those names to the constraints as they exist. So let me get rid of one here. The pin column here is the actual pin on the hardware. We can select those two things and connect them like that. We could also use this graphical representation. Now this is where it gets fun. These graphical representations probably don't exist for your board. What they are is essentially a JSON file with some shapes. And when I started last night, there was no NANDland Go board graphical view. And I said, well, I want to see what that looks like. And I spent probably about 45 minutes throwing together this little view. You can see I don't have all of the components on it yet. I'm still working my way through. But I had an unreasonable amount of fun making this work. You may be able to find a pre-existing one for your board. The pin planner will work just fine without the graphical view. But if we wanted to do this graphically, I believe we can select that on the board, select that, and it will work just like choosing from the list of pins. Now I said something about simulation, so let's take a look at that. Flipping over to this project, this just has a counter and it's going to light up the LEDs in a certain pattern as that counter goes up. Now, in addition to this Verilog file, we also have a test bench that is aware of all the inputs and outputs and is going to drive our Verilog for us. So we're going to go ahead. You can see that we can choose which tool we're using to simulate. Since I'm using the open source tool set on a Mac, iVerilog is, I believe, my only choice. And I'm going to click Simulate here. And that's it. You can see that if we look at our file, we were driving these based on successively higher and lower, or more significant and least significant bits of the counter. And if we look at the waveform, that's what we see. We can see that, let me zoom in a bit here. We can see that LED 1 is being driven at the fastest frequency and LED 4 is being driven at the slowest frequency. If we wanted to view more waveforms on our viewer, we do that from over here. So if we want to throw the clock up here, we just click that plus. There's our clock, obviously very high resolution. And there's our counter, which should pretty much match our clock. And there we go. That's the simulator. So I will say that this was both easier and more complicated to set up than iStudio. iStudio involved some swizzling and finicky behavior with the macOS's Gatekeeper component. This just installed, downloaded the tools. Actually, it was able to use the same tools that I downloaded via Nish Tahir's Icicle downloader. If you download your tools with APIO, it'll work with that. If you're on Windows or Linux and have access to the non-open source tools, this will work with those as well. It actually is agnostic about what the tools are beneath. Once I actually was in this IDE and using it, I will say there is a little bit of a learning curve. The way they've kind of dealt with the Windows docking and undocking, I managed to lose some Windows for an extended period of time until I figured out how to get them back. Typical Mac OS, Mac fan behavior, I guess. But I think this is really a viable alternative to the two flows I saw. For me personally, I like editing my files in Emacs, using a makefile to compile and send everything over to the FPGA feels pretty simple to me. But I could see that if I had a more complicated project with a lot of components, having this kind of IDE would be really, really helpful. So this is a third option for you if you would like to program FPGAs on Mac. I hope that you found this useful. If I have inspired you to do your own FPGA programming on your Macintosh, like a rebel who apparently shouldn't be using the Mac for anything, if I am to believe certain really weirdly angry people on Reddit. If you're one of those people, leave a comment down below, share your projects with us, tell us what you're doing. I would love to see some of the fruits of your labor. The channel is Tea Leaves Programming. We're programming like it's 1979. Thanks for watching.